Thank you, Margaret. The Quality Management Institute has been very pleased with our association with Margaret and the BCS Quality Group and Raid Alceza. Raid, of course, has also been associated with QMI and the International Council of Systems Engineering, so he's been through this several times. We're preparing an upcoming third cohort at BCS, and we've been very, very pleased at our progress. And the quality and the level of participation has been very, very impressive. I'm happy to be here today to sort of assist and back up and be thankful for Matt Lewis, who's here today. Matthew is newly certified ITQM, was an outstanding learner student in this process, did a project demonstrating excellence that was so effective as to be recognized by the King, and he can tell you a little bit more about that. But Matt, thank you for being here, and of course you've been invited into our leadership circle, and I know you have good things to say today. Take a minute or two and tell them a little bit about where you've come from and where you're about to go, and what you thought of the course before you share your position.
Yeah, perfect. I was offered the opportunity to take part in the IT quality management scholarship through BCS, like I mentioned, completely free. It's one of those things that you kind of think, okay, some of the stuff we're talking about should be common sense. Why would I send out processes and people into the world that have defects in? You just wouldn't. But it's the systematic approach to how those processes and the qualities of an IT quality manager and how they're applied to your day-to-day, simple things like I'll go on to explain some of them in the presentation, but when we say things like vocational certainty, like should I be here? Do I have the credentials to be where I need to be, or do I have the integrity to say I probably should pass this on to someone else, or I should really go get myself qualified and learn before I take on something like this. So it was the putting it all into kind of logical sequence or logical areas that then helped me apply all the things that I kind of knew a bit about before, but apply them better. It's a really valuable 6 months. It improved my report writing, improved outside of the scholarship, or as a result of the products from the scholarship, it improved a lot of my outside of the scholarship work in terms of some of the stuff I was delivering in report writing for work, some technical documentation. There's been a number of times now where I've had to explain really in-depth technical projects to non-technical audiences, and a lot of the stuff that I did through the QMI and the ITQM have definitely helped and kind of lent into that. So always grateful, and like Larry said, I've been accepted into the leadership circle now. So if anyone on this call does find themselves applying for cohort 3 and attending, then I will be one of your co-hosts with many esteemed people like Larry and Ray and Margaret. So if at any point during this this presentation or afterwards, my contact details at the end. So if you have any questions about the ITQM or anything like that, please do reach out. It is really worthwhile, and not to mention it's free for BCS members, when it should be at a cost of, I think it was around £1,800. So I'm all for free qualifications, especially when I can get something out of it myself. Is that kind of what you were looking for, Larry?
That's great, Matt. Feel free to go ahead. It's your show now, and we'll support you as needed.
Perfect. So thanks. As mentioned, this kind of IT quality management is something I kind of thought I did quite well. In my head, it was a common sense approach. You wouldn't half cock things. You wouldn't go, oh, that will do when you're getting stuff out the door. But actually, it was the underlying foundation that really that the course really brought out to applying to a project. So this particular project, whilst I go into some of the parts where I applied the process to the systems, actually the main thing I want to kind of take away are the things that I took from the ITQM, and it's a bit of a shameless plug, but to kind of hopefully advertise to you to cohort 3. So as I mentioned, yeah, so Matthew Lewis, and I'll go on to a bit of a who am I. Firstly, I always like to start with a quote. So it is not necessary to change, but survival is not mandatory. I have this at the bottom of my signature block. It is something that resonates with me quite well. We don't have to change, but we also don't have to survive. Change is a necessary part of survival, be that inside work, outside of work, or anywhere. Yeah, I really like that, and please take it away if you do too. So over the course of the next sort of 30-ish, possibly more minutes, I'm going to cover who I am, a brief introduction to myself. I'll open that up to Larry as well, although he's already introduced himself, but if he wants to elaborate further, there'll be a portion there for himself or Raid as well. Then we'll go into what the problem was. Why was there a need for change? What was it that was identified that I could apply these things to? And then once I applied that, I go into the management project itself, and how do I apply quality management to my problem? I could have, as I've previously done before, gone into projects and just gone, I know what I want to finish at the end. Let's just do those bits because I know what I need to do to get there. This has kind of, as I mentioned, put it into kind of a logical process, logical step by step, almost that it's a lot easier to follow, a lot easier to do, and it kind of clears up all the products a little bit. And then I go into a bit about the benefits of the organization. So yeah, what after this did my organization take away from it? Because everyone likes a project that delivers good outputs at the end. So we're going into the who am I? I will apologise. I do speak quite fast, so if at any point I do keep racing ahead or speak too fast to understand, please do slow me down. I just get really excited really quickly. So that's me. So Matthew Lewis, I'm a member of the BCS currently. As I go on to explain, so I'm currently applying for CITP at the moment. I've got 20 years of IT experience, so I'm 37 now, so I was fortunate enough to have completed my GCSEs at school a year early, which led me to be able to do my A-levels a year earlier. So I was able to get out into the world of growing up working a little bit sooner than most. 15 of those years have been in the British Army, so 15 of those 20 military experience, focusing mainly on systems engineering, network engineering, and radio frequencies, RF engineering, that sort of stuff. Now I tend to specialize in cybersecurity, around the kind of data engineering and info security elements, as well as IT quality management and project management. I've got a number of qualifications in SANS and NIST, so related to cybersecurity, along with this Cisco ethical hacker. I'm an elastic data analyst and observability engineer, among many other project management quals and stuff like that. That kind of feeds into a little bit about my project in a bit. So as I mentioned, I'm currently a member of the BCS, applying for Chartered IT Professional. That's currently ongoing at the moment. I was a participant on cohort 1, so the first cohort of the IT Quality Management Scholarship, where I delivered this project. This project was recognised in the King's Birthday Honours List, and I received a CGS commendation, so Chief of General Staff, top military guy. Essentially, it's the one below MBE. Nearly got there, but not quite. And as we previously mentioned, so for ITQM cohort 3, I'll be a co-host among some very capable people. So that's a bit of an honour. That's who I am. That's kind of where I come from. So throughout this presentation, there's kind of going to be 4 key themes. These aren't they're in the syllabus of the ITQM, but it's not it's not everything. These are the 4 that kind of resonated with me the most, I guess. Excuse me. So Zero Defects Attitude. So that's us. It's keeping our promise to. Although we know we are not going to achieve perfection, although it's nice, we don't expect to get to perfection. Definitely not straight away through people or processes, but it's about not accepting that standard of quality to go out. Like we mentioned, we wouldn't expect things to go out the door, oh, that'll do, half, half baked, we'll finish it later. It's that kind of, how would I expect this, if this was to fall into the hands of my friends, my family, my organization, or myself, how would I feel if this got to me? So that's kind of the zero defects attitude, and that is woven throughout the ITQM course. It's kind of the bedrock. The price of non-conformance. So, when we try to get stakeholder buy-in, or maybe we need a little bit more budget, or we need more resource in terms of workforce, or whatever it is we need. The price of non-conformance is kind of what I use as the bargaining tool. It's what is the cost to us as the organisation, to the optics, our reputation, our financial, it could be a heavy financial cost, or in some cases, especially in the military, the price of non-conformance could be life. What is the cost if we don't apply this, if we don't make things better, or if we don't send this out the door, or new processes, new products, what if we don't do this? Then we hit the vocational certainty, so bottom left. So this is where we kind of ask ourselves, like, am I qualified to be here? Should I be in this chair? Should I be involved in this particular discussion, or should I be bringing people in? Am I equipped by either education and experience to do the task that is in front of me? If at any point you are not sure about those, then you've kind of got to take a step back and say, what do I need to do to bridge that gap to get there? Because it's kind of the first thing. It's almost your insurance. So for vocational certainty, if you've got the skills and experience and everything behind you to know that you're making the right decisions, or at least to back up your decisions through, like, say, experience or education, then people will look at you slightly differently. They'll know you're qualified. They'll know you've had the experience. They've seen the battle scars. They understand where your decision making is coming from. And then when we look at it, personal authenticity, spelled incorrectly, apologies. It's socializing a culture that kind of keeps to the promises they make. So you'll hear that a lot as well through the course if you apply. So keeping the promise. It's all about keeping the promise, and it's about building a social culture that does that. And it's about taking responsibility to make those changes. So where you live, where you work, and owning it. So I'll go into what our problem was. Okay, so this system, it wasn't broken. But what I put at the bottom there, if it isn't broken, don't fix it, right? Incorrect. So our system wasn't broken, the particular system I'm going to talk about. But when we talk about the price of non-conformance, if I hadn't applied this, or if we hadn't made changes, what's the so what? So this particular system, so the architecture was severely out of date. So the system was meant to go out of date in 2014. It had its last technical refresh in 2011. Before that, so you're hitting 2014. It got extended then till 2017, and then again till 2019, where every financial year, it's going to go out of date. There's a new system coming. And then we hit a point where Microsoft, for example, going to vendor drop there, are no longer going to support it. So we had Windows 7, no longer supported, no longer going to support any of the server applications we had, and a number of the Cisco devices that were involved in there were no longer supported. So what did that mean? That meant that there was no security patches coming out. So, when we're looking at stuff against the kind of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, we're no longer covered, no longer patched. So vulnerabilities exist. And the out of service date kept getting pushed back. Okay. So the out of date system architecture was an issue. Some of the hardware that was running and some of the expectations on the system to the task they were to perform weren't up to scratch then because of the hardware it was on. So hard drives were maxing out of storage space. RAM was running, and CPUs were running extremely hot, and we had no way to detect this. Okay, the out of service date again get pushed back. So the out of service date is now Q3 25. A good nearly 11 years after its initial out of service date. So you can imagine kind of the state it's in. The issue I had with trying to kind of change this and get this kind of new system or kind of system upgrade in place was the buy-in. The out of service date, it's going to be out of date soon. Who cared? Not really anyone. If I'm honest, I can put that quite bluntly, I think. Getting the buy-in was fantastically hard. However, through vocational certainty and personal authenticity, people trusted me. People trusted the decision I've made because I've been kind of through the rings with this system. I've had the kind of the background in cybersecurity and logging and monitoring tools that actually it didn't matter what they kind of thought of the system, but they trusted my opinion. Another issue I had was the KSEB, so knowledge, skills, experience, and behaviours. So I was a part of a wider team, but actually myself and one other were the only people trained in this particular system that we were trying to implement. So when we're looking at, this wasn't fully my day-to-day job. So once I'd implemented the system and kind of done the handover, who's then going to look after it? So as a part of the kind of problem analysis, and I'll go through how that was done. The handover was a key part of that as well. So it's all well and good, implementing these systems, implementing the processes to make this system better. But then as soon as I step away, if everything kind of falls apart, then what was it all for? And then how are we going to achieve it? There was a number of options available. We had enterprise agreements with a number of security monitoring tools, network visibility tools, stuff like that. So actually, for the most part, when I'm talking about trying to get buy-in and trying to ask for budget, that was an easy conversation because the budget side of it almost didn't matter because we had these licenses in place. But it was about identifying if they were the best tools, if they weren't, and did they fit the purpose. So we start going into the project a little bit more. When I first started, I kind of had 10 questions that I'd always go off myself. What's the current situation and what's the end goal? Normally, pre-ITQM, I would have gone for questions 1, 2, and 3. Cool, right? What's the current situation? What do I need? What's the end? And how I'm going to get there. And then I just kind of jump from product to product or process to process with almost a bit erratically, just trying to get to the end. And what it ended up with a number of times is, okay, the solution was there, but it was messy. So then these other questions I started to ask myself of what do I offer? So do I take the role of project manager? Do I take the role of technical lead, or where's my role in all this? Because if it's just project manager, I need to employ a wider team, and then that kind of feeds into who do I need to get buy-in from? Because if I need to borrow, especially in the military, if I need to borrow people from somewhere, I need to ask someone higher up to be able to do that. So I needed to sell this. I needed to sell this idea to them, and I needed to get buy-in from them. There was an element that I needed to get a bit of funding down the line as well. So I needed to get buy-in from a lot higher up because, again, with the military, a lot of the purse strings are held by people. We call it the ivory tower, and we kind of go with cap in hand. But fortunately, I had I'm not going to say guy on the inside, but it's someone that we done a bit of work before. And again, because of that vocational certainty came into it, he trusted my judgment and helped me get that through. What are the requirements? That's a big one. So it couldn't be the world according to Matt. I don't use the system day in, day out. I identified that there were issues with it, but I didn't know the nuances. So actually a key part of the design of the solution was engaging with the engineers, the people that use it, the team leads, but also the product providers. So we call them level 4. So where we are the level 3 support, the level 4 is kind of industry and stuff like that. So I had to engage with them, firstly for permission as well, but also, to really nail down what it is that people wanted. Did they want dashboards of, or alerts popping up when the hard drives were at 80%, or this is kind of the ideas I was having, but then they were saying, actually at 70%, that's when they fail because, they need 30% redundant for the upgrade or for the patching cycle to happen. All these things that I wouldn't have known had I not engaged. The economic factors, I completely was not aware of any of the areas that I needed to engage with. I'd never done a project on this scale before, military-wise, that required me to have any kind of budget. Anything that I kind of used before was begged, borrowed, and stolen from across the bazaars, be that kit, equipment, or licenses for stuff. I've never had a requirement to actually go in and kind of ask for money. So that whole process was new for me. So that was a factor in asking for the kind of economic side. Communicating the plan was easier the higher up I got, I think. So the most friction I got was from the engineers. Not that they didn't want it to change, but they, a number of them have worked with it for 5, 6, 7 years and didn't believe that it would change. So I kind of had to go in with it, put my flag in the ground and say, look, I'm here to make the change, completely open, transparent, and all that good stuff. In terms of this kind of project, what will happen if I don't achieve this? So we'll go back to the price and non-conformance. So those vulnerabilities that kind of exist. So the solution that was put in place, a SIEM tool with endpoint detection and kind of security monitoring put onto it. If I didn't do that, those vulnerabilities would still exist, especially with those vendors no longer supporting. They had already extended their support by a year. It cost like 4 or 5 million quid, significantly more than what my project cost. But yeah, not achieving that. So if vulnerabilities start getting exploited especially on a military system, whatever the security sensitivity of it, that could have a detrimental effect on military operations, therefore potentially life. So this was a big one for me. Like, if I don't do this, what will happen? Because I kind of put money on even though they said it's going to go out of date next year, or it's going to go out of service next year and something will replace it. I have seen before that isn't always the case. So, we put this in place to then say, well, okay, well, what if it doesn't? And then again, it was about identifying the key players. That was big. Like I say, the engineers, the low level kind of the lower level engineers up into the higher kind of more strategic place. People in the ivory tower that don't necessarily, I'm not going to say disconnected from the shop floor, but don't have the exposure that they should. Communicating across the board for those was key as well, especially within my own organizational area. There were people that thought that my time, my effort could be best placed elsewhere. And again, it was about selling the plan, selling the products, and being open and transparent. And look, this means a lot to me because of ABC. These are the benefits to the organization. It's not going to cost a great deal in firstly money, but also workforce hours. So it's not a massive burden on us, but we could have such a massive effect on the system and its usage. So something that will come up in the ITQM, should you go for it, and I keep saying that, but please do consider it, is work process analysis. So this is that logical piece I was talking about. I've really erratically jumped into projects before. I know what needs to be done. I know how to get there. I'm just going to do it. It had worked, but like I said, it was messy. So the 5-stage process that kind of we learned through Larry and the QMI was amazing. Describe what needs to be done. There's a number of headings under there that feed into just how to describe that. That's your storyboard, your picture of what is it exactly I'm trying to get after? If there's one major thing I want to do, but the rest are nice to have. So perfect example, Moscow must, should, could, would, like, or won't have. That was big in kind of that area. And the other piece of that was feeding into researching how to do it right. That probably took up, I would say, about 70% of my project time was researching how to do the project right. That was vendor analysis, looking across the variety of tools I had available, and ensuring that they had basically doing a cost benefit analysis. What did one have that the other didn't? What did one provide that the other couldn't? And as I mentioned, which ones of these have we already got? Which ones are already in place, and which ones would be a really quick win to do? So for us, for example, the tool in question was Elastic. So the Elastic esteemed tool, if you're not familiar, is a centralized login and monitoring tool that aggregates logs from across a number of different endpoints, etc. And you can detect and respond to security incidents and things like that natively from the application. We already had an enterprise license with that. So for me, with my engineers, access to kind of training licenses for that as well, that was a really quick win because actually there was no cost there at all. Going into calculating what it would cost, so we're not just talking about financial here. So I would need a team of people. I need some people to take away from what we would consider in the military our day to day. Our day to day is in my arena, it is kind of support to that system, as in like if users are having issues with that system, not necessarily do you have enough time to do any capability development, which is kind of where I was sat. So I was begging people for people and to lend me some expertise, some SMEs across the board to be able to do that. Deciding on a course of action, again, that the research on how to do it right was massive in that. So deciding on a course of action. So instead of picking a particular vendor or a particular configuration set or what the rules or alerts were going to be, that was all done through research on how to do it right. And then the implementation of the work processes. So applying all of the stuff I'd done, all the research, all the calculations, or deciding on the course of action, and then putting it actually into place. So installing the scene tool, ensuring that people were trained, and ensuring that essentially it had longevity. That it wasn't just going to fall away as soon as I moved away. I have since moved department. And after a little wobble, it looked like it was going to go, but actually the processes that were put in place stood the test. We had people that were trained, a really succinct training pipeline to make sure that people were constantly trained. We had new people come in or people leave. That the churn was managed. There's natural churn in kind of any workforce or any kind of area. So to manage that was easier for us because we live on 2 or 3 year posting cycles. Therefore, we could almost plan when people are going to leave or when people are going to arrive. So that was really handy for us. There were, you'll be glad to know, a number of benefits to the organization. So system security was, it was up massively. Even prior to the patches no longer coming out from vendors and stuff like that, I think the implementation of this solution upped the security and the durability of the system tenfold. That was amazing because it came at low cost. Instead of millions and millions of pounds, we were looking in the tens of thousands of pounds, and that was purely because of the owners of the system charged us for implementing changes. Weird military kind of probably exists outside as well, but the owners of the system charged us for scoping what the impact would be to do this work, and then they were still really kind enough after charging us to let me do it. So that was good. The external optics. When we talk about the authenticity and the vocational certainty, like people were looking at this, and this was massive. It was his first kind of use of the particular system that we implemented against. It was the first use within the British Army. So actually, the external optics from high were like, okay, cool. So we might not have cared about this particular system that they've achieved this against, but what we care about is what they've achieved, because now we can use that as the blueprint for all of our other systems. So this was taken from the system that this was done against, and then used against, or used in conjunction with, a lot more other systems, and has been used as kind of, like I said, the blueprint for how that's done. And it's increased our defensive posture, especially across military, where we're using systems with other nations. Particularly, let's call them hostile environments. There's one probably you could guess at the moment ongoing, that we definitely want to be sure that our systems are protected, and our defensive posture as a result of this project. Again, not just because it was against the system that's in use, but against the system that it was done against, but because it's been able to be applied against all those other systems. That defensive posture is massive, and it's proved a number of times to be successful, which is really positive. And the KSEB. So what I'd like to kind of really highlight onto that bit is the knowledge, skills, and experience, and behaviours and mentality of my workforce, that the result of all of this work they've done, they are now massively skilled in a particular scene tool. I took people that had zero cybersecurity experience and applied kind of them into this, that are now doing cybersecurity work elsewhere. Provide them with civilian qualifications as a result of the training licenses we already had available to us. And that improvement on kind of motivation and morale has now generated a team of individuals elsewhere, because a number of them have been posted on since, a number of them elsewhere that are now out in the world kind of doing similar stuff. Okay, they're not ITQM qualified, but those qualities and those things that we've spoken about are now instilled within them, because they've seen me do it, lead it, breathe it, and they've seen the results. So now they believe it. They're out there kind of doing the same thing, similar things. So they were kind of there was many more benefits, but these were the key 5 that I kind of picked out. So when we talk about the ITQM, so a number of deliverables that were made. So a project demonstrating excellence, so PDE, that kind of Larry and the team had set us. So firstly, obviously, all the work had to be documented, and that was kind of covered in the supporting documentation that I'll go on to. But the key bit was the executive summary. If someone only had 10-20 minutes to read what you had done, what was the key takeaway? So that had to be limited to 3 pages, and I think I just scraped that in. The support documentation, there was kind of no limit on that. However, mine was over 30 pages, and I apologise publicly to Larry and Ray that they kind of had to sift through all that and see my handwritten notes and God knows what else. That brain just scrawled on a page. That was key. Actually documenting every kind of step of that process and seeing my thoughts on the page. You kind of start to box them into those work process kind of element areas anyway. You say, what do I need to achieve, right? Or what is the project? And you go, right, it's this. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. I know that by the end of this, I want to achieve that. So already you're starting to describe what needs to be done. And then once you start following through the processes, you can get carried away. And like I said, over 30 pages, I'm sure caused Larry some late nights. And then a part of the submission is the CV or resume for Larry on the call. But yeah, where does this come from? This is almost the vocational certainty bit backing up what we've done, the project over time. Mm-hmm. To Larry, he's saying, "Oh, you're cool. You've done all this stuff, but how come you did it?" And the CV is the backup to that. Noting that I've kind of blasted through that quite quickly. I have on the next slide left my contact details, so I'm more than happy to kind of spin up sessions with people or any member of the BCS to kind of go through this a bit more in depth. I can only limit how in depth it is. based on the security classification of the system. As Larry will note during my the summary and the documentation, there's a lot of stuff in there that I couldn't mention because of being a military system, etc. But that was kind of taken across. But I'm happy to kind of host extra sessions to kind of talk through areas that if people are experiencing similar things, just looking out of date, or kind of any areas of seeing tools or monitoring, logging, or just applying some of these processes to your areas, and then please do kind of reach out. Happy for people to take my contact details. I'm on LinkedIn, so please reach out, connect. If you have any questions outside of this forum, please drop me an email, and I'll look to kind of get back to you and kind of answer where I can. Again, I could talk the hind legs off a donkey with this project, and as again Larry and Raid have seen on a number of occasions on some of the ITQM cohort discussions. So that brings me nicely into my final part. I really do encourage you to kind of jump on the scholarship. It's at no cost. It's 6 months work. It's not 6 months constant work. I say 1 to at a push, 3 hours a week for the learning material, and then you're looking probably as much or as little as you want to do for your PDE, depending on how much you want to get out of it. A lot of this is you get out what you put in. So the next one starts on the 5th of June, 2025. It'll be co-hosted by Larry, Braid, Margaret, myself, and 2 other members of the previous cohorts. And ultimately, we're a nice bunch. It's free to BCS members, and please do reach out. The documentation for it was on the event page for the webinar, so have a look at that. But again, if you want to reach out to my email address, or any of myself or Aid on the call, please do. Yeah, that's kind of all I've got. I open up to probably I'll go to Larry first. If there's anything you want to kind of add or Aid.
Well, I thought it was important that you mentioned at the end of this that this project had a significant measure of confidentiality, and it had a military application. So although, and I've had a number of PDEs written, which were either highly confidential or such a proprietary process that people found a tremendous amount of value, even though they had to limit some of the things that they would normally share in a presentation like this. To your situation particularly, the executive summary was very well written, and it enticed me to look at those 30 pages. It was like, oh yeah, this is a good teaser here, because this is a substantial project being taken in a very serious context. And one of the things about the course that does require the project demonstrating excellence, so that we do know that we're giving a certification to someone that's going to apply it in the real world. Applying it to a real world project within your scope is great, but you can also do something simple. And we've had people share projects where they were fixing an additional room on their house and things like that. I would like to ask you to respond to Raymond Willis, Matthew. He said, describe the role of situational awareness in your project. And another question he asked was the communications. Describe the role of communication with stakeholders. And I think that and situational awareness kind of goes together because of the need to be aware of all of the various stakeholders and what they need. So maybe you'd like to speak to him about that.
Yeah, perfect. I'm just trying to. Obviously, I'm on a Mac, so I'm trying to find my toolbar at the moment. But yeah, give me a second. I'll bring the chat up.
Okay.
Have a look.
And I'll just remind everyone that Raid has put in the chat box, the application and the schedule and the overview of the course.
Yeah, so situational awareness. For me, and I assume I'm going to make an assumption that we're talking about the same kind of situational awareness. For me, it was kind of the optics of current climate. What's going on in the world at the moment. There was a significant push given events that are happening in Eastern Europe that I was kind of took real note into saying, this is going to be big. There's a significant need to start doing more for our systems. There's work already happening, but there's a significant need to do more for our systems because of the threat. Does that answer the question? Is that kind of the same sort of?
You have a response, Raymond? You can unmute and discuss it, Raymond, if you wish. Yeah, the thought that came to me too, Matt, is you have this external threat that you describe as part of it. Go ahead, Raymond.
Hi. Thanks, Matt. I'm really, I suppose, I certainly don't want you to disclose anything about the operations as such, but what I meant is that in a management situation, there are things that are changing. There are your inputs and the status and of things, your processes, the conditions of your processes, where defects come from, and the consequences of those things. This is all happening and will affect the ongoing situation and how your project develops. So that's sort of what I meant. But there is the input into monitoring the IT system that you are considering the condition of, and the fact that it is, I suppose, currently operational, and that you are seeking to replace it, but it's been specified and operates under particular constraints, and a replacement also then needs to fulfill those within a related specification and set of constraints. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Okay. So if I understood correctly, everything that was kind of done, like I said, was almost the blueprint for what needs to come. What's been really fortunate, and what's been kind of really beneficial to future projects and to myself, is that I've been kind of involved in really early engagement with projects that are coming on board within the military or government. Is obviously secure by design is a big thing. So everything now that's coming across, so any systems that are now implemented within government or MOD have to be secure by design. So all this stuff that I'm trying to all the stuff that I was having dramas with or having issues with trying to get onto this current system won't necessarily be a thing in the future, because by the nature of SVD, they will have to be compliant to come into service.
Feel free to interact, Raymond, if you want.
Well, I just thank you, because of course you're operating in a situation with very many requirements that are mutually, bearing on the any changes to configuration or to platforms and software and so on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I'll address your kind of the second one there. So the role of communication with the stakeholders in technical areas, that was difficult. For me, it was the translation necessary from, I've got some fantastic engineers, some really, really clever technical engineers, and we've all seen them across every organization we've worked in. They are fantastic at what they do, but you cannot put them in front of people just to speak, or to put wrong. You can put them in front of people to speak. You can't put them in front of people to necessarily tell the audience what they need to know. or that translation piece. So I've got engineers that are fantastic with ones and zeros, but if you ask them to articulate that to higher command or stakeholders in a non-technical way, it'd be like leaving a biscuit in a cup of tea. They just absolutely fall apart. One of my key roles was acting as that translation. A lot of the engineers are saying, we want to do this, we want to implement X, Y, Z against this particular area of the system with this. So when I have to try and translate that into a non-technical speak for the higher stakeholders. So the communication bit was extremely key, and that was, again, I say about the zero defects actually being the golden thread. Actually, the communication, the transparency, but not necessarily the transparency, but the ability for the stakeholders to understand what is going on every step of the way was key, especially in the trying to tell them, why do we need to implement this in the technical area? Why do I need to train my soldiers to do other things? Really trying to explain, even though they had no tangible benefit to see because it hadn't happened yet. You're trying to explain, and this is where kind of the vocational certainty and the experience, and they say, oh, that's Matty Lewis. He's done X, Y, Z before. I trust what he's saying. That bit there was extremely key. What's the other ones? And answer to your second question, so the DevOps and security architecture, kind of no, is kind of the really short answer to that. So this was my second or third kind of bit of exposure to doing this kind of work. So I was extremely, I don't say naive, inexperienced in kind of those areas. And, although the kind of products and processes were in place to make it a logical thing, I wasn't going after kind of bill of materials or operations monitoring as such. What we did use was, or what was quite handy, was I brought a team in from what we call the cyber ISOC, so Cyber Information Security Operations Center. They have a team that they were standing up to go out and do what we're calling onboarding, to bring the systems on. And they were generating the use cases. So I guess when we're talking about the kind of the monitoring of it and stuff like that, they were the ones that generating the use cases based off the risk documentation held against the system. So the engineers that use the system were giving me this would be really cool to monitor from an operations perspective. I want to see how hot my CPU is running at all times. I want to see how close I am to the bone or the threshold of my hard drives running out, etc. And then the onboarding team would then sit down with the documentation set or the accreditation documentation set and say, well, actually, looking at current threats and the risks and areas you hold, we also recommend that you do these bits. So yeah, the specialist advice, the SME, subject matter expert advice was kind of all we really had in from those. Bar the financial bit that I had completely no idea about before I started. And the only bit I do know about it now is that it's a complete headache, and there's people that should probably do that a lot better than I do. So yeah, those kind of bits, the only kind of specialist advice that we'd had. Other than that, and probably just trying to think of the word without sounding arrogant, but it was quite easy to manage within a small team, and I kind of had everything I needed with the small team of engineers and the one or two people that I relied on outside for, like I say, the financial and then the onboarding piece.
Thanks,
Raymond, one of the things that Matthew mentioned that's I think very important from my point of view of my years of experience is being aware of who can and cannot carry a certain position, fulfill a specific role. I have a term I talk about head down engineers and head down programmers versus those who looked up and are facing the realities of getting things through a process, through the politics, through the budgeting, through all of the different difficulties that come up that where sometimes the engineering description is very clear, well done, but not understood. And so you need someone who is willing to follow simple steps and speak clear language. One of the things that I liked about the way Matt used our work process analysis model, and I hear this often from people that are graduates of Project Management Institute, and no disrespect to them at all. They're a great deliverer of curriculum, but that it is so much more simple and so much more direct. If you have a certain amount of vocational certainty, as Matthew does and did in this project, then it doesn't need the really minute drill down control points that a lot of project management approaches do. And you become so much more conversational. It's so much easier to coalesce people around you. And then it gets back to your awareness and your leadership skills to select those for the different roles. And it's really no different than a combat situation. When you talk about this taking place in the context of a military product or a military service going to the outfit, situational awareness is drilled into their brain. And you notice Matt's initial reaction was, "What's the threat?" Well, yes, that's exactly right. And what we do in work process analysis is sort of to identify and prioritize the threats within the process. It's often referred to as risk-based quality management. So everything we do in QM is comparing the risks of things, the rewards of things, the capabilities. That's why we emphasize vocational certainty in our training to a great degree, where you make your own decision, where you can contribute and when to restrain yourself and not to complicate the process. So that was one thing I thought that Matt, that you described very well in your process that you were excelling at. And it's what helps us as the instructor, as the reviewer of the PDE, to see in all those documents that you provided in that excellent executive summary, the reality of which you were able to do that. It wasn't just a theoretical experience. It wasn't a pro forma thing. It had impact to it. So I just suggest to the listeners today, the participants, that Matt's presentation demonstrates the wide range of application of the work process analysis techniques that we teach in the curriculum, as well as the human aspects. The first half of our course is designated more to how to develop a quality culture, those things that he mentioned about personal authenticity and ethical dependability and those things. And the second half is all about applying those to create outcomes, to create viable processes. The curriculum is I guess Matt, you might say it's not severe, but it's significant. It's a challenge on competency.
Yeah, it is in depth, and it's built that way by design. There's a lot there too. It's, as I mentioned at the start, you think that you know a lot of this stuff through common sense. Like, oh yeah, of course, why wouldn't I do it to the best of my ability? But actually, when you drill down into these individual bits, it does make a lot more sense, and there's a lot more meat to the bones that I really liked on the course. Keith's asked a really good question. There didn't seem to be any feedback in the workflow, for example. What would happen if doing it right is impossible within budget, or if further requirements are found during development? So I'm going to kind of answer that back to front. So there were feedback stages throughout. I must have, I didn't list those, but at every kind of decision point, there's a feedback stage of whoever the stakeholder is in that kind of in that part. So in the supporting documentation, I think there's a number of pages of engineering interviews and stakeholder interviews that were held, to make sure that people were happy, they still understood the project and the direction it was taking. If at any point there were parts for them to interject, or if there were parts of the implementation of the solution they didn't like, they could feed those back in at any point during that. The first part, so what would happen if doing it right isn't possible within budget, that really comes down to hammering home what the price of non-conformance would be to your stakeholders, and then it's having the humility as well as a project manager or a quality manager to say, okay, cool, if no is the final answer, then the MVP, like the minimum viable product, is going to have to be this. But if you're only going to give me this, then the risks are inherently worse in other areas here, X, Y, Z. But fortunately for me, I don't have an answer to that question because I didn't get hit with that problem. So, if down the road I implement something that someone doesn't give me the budget, and it's going to happen at some point, then I'll just have to articulate the risks, and then the risk is then transferred to them because I've highlighted the issue, I've highlighted how I'd like to fix it, the budget to do so, and if it's them that are then going to hold the risk to say they're not going to release that budget to fix this problem, patch this hole, or implement this new system, then kind of I think it's about risk transference rather than what to do if we can't. It's just escalating that risk, but then just still doing again the best we can with the tools we've got. I didn't think about it, but what I'll actually do if Larry, Margaret, and Ray don't mind, is I will attempt to find in my brain of like any good Mac user, my desktop is a complete car crash. I've got folders of folders, IT, and what I would do, I understand a lot of this has kind of been theoretical, and if I can, oh cool, I can't do that.
And just may I mention, as you're looking for that, Matt, I have a hard stop here at 3 o'clock, but everyone should feel free to continue with this discussion. And I encourage you to submit your application to Ride and Margaret, who will review it, and I'll get back to you about the scholarship offer that we're making. We want people that want to expand their sense of knowledge base and vocational certainty, and join the circle of people like Matt and Raid, and Margaret, I call her Lady Margaret because she has been a long-serving leader in this area of IT and at BCS. So thank you for allowing me to participate today, and I wish everyone the best.